Perfect. All right, team. So, welcome to a series of discussion points that Summit is hosting with partners in the industry. This is, of course, to assist leaders to think differently in future proofing their businesses, of course, focusing on the communication, and, of course, the different themes of communication and innovation. So, thank you, Debbie, for joining us today again. And taking a look at Debbie. Debbie is a founder and managing director of Catalyst Consulting. She, of course, also is the founder and managing director of World Alive. She has grown these two companies into two successful consulting companies. And in World Alive, this is where she focuses more on your personal empowerment and transformation, transformation company. Okay, sorry, personal empowerment and transformation. Sorry about that. So Debbie has 20 years experience, or over 20 years experience in field strategy, leadership development, change management, and added to some of that, she's also a change agent and an executive coach. I have not read out all of it because, of course, she has a great portfolio there, Debbie, of course, taken from the years of experience that she has. So, Debbie, of course, as I said, it is great to have you here for today's discussion. And then, of course, we've got Matt, MD of Summits, that is joining us again today. So, Matt has passion for, of course, innovation and doing things differently, which comes from his frontline of business and management roles within the intelligence or business intelligence, sales and business development, and also commercial finance, which is, of course, great when it comes to such discussions. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Kira.
To start today's topic, maybe to channel today's topic, I'd like to maybe state some of the key learning points that I'd like for everyone to focus on. Like number one would be, how do we go beyond the worst case scenarios that we might be faced with? We're taking a look at some of the extensions that we might be faced with, or maybe extending your timeline assumptions and planning against the scenarios. And then number two, which I'm also going to keep reminding you guys, if you may just probably forget about them. Number two being maintaining the transparent and leadership and empathetic leadership. And then number three being assisting our human capital to be future ready for business and, of course, in the years to come. And lastly, I'd like for us to maybe focus on why we need to work closely with communities for our businesses to thrive into the future. And with that being said, if you don't have any questions or clarifications to that, I have a question for you, Matt, taking a look at your vast experience within business. How do you think we can assist our leaders to think about the future? Although, of course, we're taking a look at the uncertainties at this present moment, and of course, taking a look at the different pivots in the different organizations that we have outside, but still within the industry.
Yeah, Kira. So I think, obviously a great question. As always, I'm going to be naughty and I'm going to pivot the question and really say, well, perhaps, and steal from some elements that I've learned along the way and coaches I've learned along the way and frameworks, and really say, well, what fundamentals perhaps do you need to have in place so that you can pivot? Because each business's pivot might look obviously very differently. And so it's really about making sure that you've got these four fundamental pillars in place and you've catered for them so that it's very easy for you to pivot. And really those four key areas, like I said, come from a framework, the Gazelles framework, and it's strategy, people, execution, and cash. And normally, as always, in anything, people always come first. But I have put people second in respect of what I want to sort of chat through. Just because your strategy in this environment may depict in respect of the suggestions I give around people. So on a strategy perspective, there's tons of gurus out there that you're able to read and obtain information in that respect. I think for me, a simple aspect of strategy is really around reframing your business. So in its simplest format, what do you do? And, how do you define what you do? And it's something we've chatted a little bit about, but if in my line of work, if I said, well, we're an accredited face-to-face training provider, that's what we do, we'd obviously be in a very difficult situation right now in respect of this particular pandemic and crisis. And it's really about saying, well, what is the outcomes then in respect of what we do? So, in respect of training and an accredited training provider, what you're doing is you're effectively granting people skill sets to be better versions of themselves. And that might be a skill set that makes them more productive. It might be a skill set that in turn helps the company generate more revenue or maybe reduce costs. So in essence, looking at that and then perhaps reframing what, let's say, as a training company we do is really grant skill sets to people to be better versions of themselves, so that has a positive financial impact on a particular business. So if you reframe your company and in respect of that's what you do, you start to open up a lot of different avenues to explore and tactics to deploy to build out your overall strategy. So that's sort of my one little piece on strategy as a takeaway. And then on people, really one suggestion I could give on the people side of things is, and this is quite a systematic approach, but is really take this time and go through your organogram and start to build out a scorecard for each role in your organization. And depending if you're a small or large organization, you might have to give this activity to a number of people. But really, the process of building a scorecard is quite a useful one, because really what you're doing is what you want to do in respect to building out the fundamentals of that scorecard is say, what is the mission of that role? And perhaps put a defined time period. So what is the mission of that role for the next 18 months? And then in respect to that mission, what are the objectives that you want achieved in those next 18 months? And maybe take 5 areas. If you think about, let's say, something that's always a focus for many entrepreneurs is a profit or EBITDA type of number. So, that role for that leader or that sort of objective for that leader might be X EBITDA in Y time frame, very specific, clear and defined outcome. And then the other aspect of the scorecard would be really what are the competencies in respect of that role that are required so that, that individual can complete the mission and essentially also be able to achieve the objectives laid down. So it's quite a useful little piece of information to have, and also helps in respect of any further recruiting into roles going forward. So that's maybe a little takeaway on the people side of things. And these are just little nuggets, and there's a lot more you can do, but just things that I've seen have helped in our organization and other organizations I've been in. And yes, Debbie, please.
No, I just thought if we could engage a little bit on this, because I think this is going to be one of those areas that's the gray space between the old and the new, particularly around both strategy and people. And you can definitely do the other two just now. Sure. But just on the people side, do we really know at the moment what people are going to be doing in 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months time? And how structured can we be around that, as opposed to potentially having a sense of purpose and where we're trying to go, and that we have to make profit and we have to be limited with our costs over this period of time. But really what the next bit of time is to explore our value and to deliver our value and find who our core customers and capabilities are and chase those down, so that we can, in short term and long term, have some different objectives. Now those might be the scorecard and the objectives you're talking about, but I think we have to work in an agile way in the next bit of time, where we might not be chasing a particular number, like an EBITDA number exactly. We need to be able to release some of that energy and that potential to find what we don't know today. So it's going to be a very interesting balance between, the structure, which is absolutely important to keep people focused and motivated, but the freedom to be creative and to explore the unknown, to allow things to emerge.
I agree with you. I think it is, you raise an absolutely great point. And I think, from a scorecard perspective, it's, your time frame is the horizon that you set. And I think absolutely is perhaps you're right. Profit number is very difficult to kind of put in place at this particular stage. So probably a bad example, but I think something interesting that we've learned in the online space, or kind of growing some other online businesses in the education space, is really around, we're not really focused on the revenue number per se. We're really focused on user engagement and user adoption. So how many people have jumped onto the platform, and really how many people are focused on the content that we're providing? We're getting great engagement on this particular piece of content. Okay, great. Well, that helps us understand that whatever we're doing there is working. So let's drive more of that. So it's a little bit more, like you said, agile and different, but it's working ultimately, I guess, trying to work towards some type of revenue number, or some type of additional sales number. But it's not necessarily, like you said, that hard and fast 100 Rand of sales that we need to make. It's more things.
I think it's going to be a real dance in the next bit of time between those few things, because business is not sustainable without a number either. So.
No, but I hear you, and it's something I think with any type of scorecard, you want to set it, like I said, to your horizon, and then say, okay, well, perhaps maybe it's a good kind of rolling point into the next point on execution. And like talking about the fundamentals of those pillars and really on execution, one of them, and I'm sort of jumping around in the execution theme, or whatever the case may be, is acting on those lead indicators, and I think that's what perhaps a lot of business needs to focus on at the moment from an execution perspective, because talking about sales is, we don't know when the sales are going to come for a lot of businesses at the moment. So it's really around, what are some of your lead indicators that drive sales? And that might be number of engagements with your customer, whatever that engagement looks like, number of webinars that you create, or, the point being is that, you can define your lead indicators. And I think what we need to be doing now as organizations is working as much as we can on those lead indicators, and trying to define perhaps new lead indicators, because there is going to be a relative, or a period of, sort of a cash-strapped economy. So, people need to be also know or feel that they're being productive. So, you need to be rather focusing on those lead indicators, and really let them eventually drag the lag indicators. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think I think that the lead indicators are absolutely important. I think one of the things I've been thinking around in terms of how do we build a culture of sort of almost empathetic, curious inquiry. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine in banking this morning who looks after the customer experience, and she was saying they've had to start re-asking questions around with their customers, and what is our core value to you, what is our core capability, what are you going to pay us rather than somebody else in the future, when there's maybe a little bit of a lean time, or there's less luxuries, or there's less. So almost like re-engaging with absolute empathy and curiosity into what is that service delivery, and then being very quickly be able to build and execute and pilot and iterate those slightly shifting service offerings, to some of our clients in that space. So I think once again, it's a balance between setting up some drivers and indicators and activity, but I think the activity needs to be very focused around asking different questions from a different perspective with absolute curiosity once again, so we don't stuck in some of the beliefs about how business is running and how relationships run from the past. So I suppose I'm stretching it a little bit into that gray space and into that unknown, because I believe we're moving into a space that business is going to be operating quite a bit differently in future.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a good sort of space to explore for a little bit. Is that I know obviously that curiosity. I mean, I think for me, it's obviously we can each refer to it in a different way, but how do you cultivate that? I mean, what is what's the secret sauce? I know probably difficult to answer, but yeah.
Yes, I mean, we're going to speak a little bit later, I think, about some of the skills, but I think, you know, curiosity and creativity are two skills that are going to be absolutely critical in this future. And, you know, we've been talking about it, and we've been on workshops, we've run workshops on creativity and curiosity, but I think what we're trying to start to understand that you need to start looking at what you believe about yourself, about the world, about how you need to be. And if we, you know, the only way we're going to change behavior is change the way we think and change the way we feel. So if we can start thinking and believing differently about it, it's important to be curious and not to judge things too quickly. It's important to keep asking questions before we close it down and we come to conclusions. It's important to hold that sort of curiosity of a young child before we become too set in our ways and have a traditional process of how we do life. I mean, the stats are that we as adults have got about 2% curiosity and creativity compared to a 5-year-old child on average. So for me, the way is helping people to reflect on their belief systems and on their habits, and then be able to start creating a shift from one belief system, so this is the way it is, versus I wonder if there's another way. Or from something around, this is what I know today, but what else can I learn tomorrow? And then start practicing that by actually creating, for example, 30 minutes a day for learning something new, or increasing the number of questions on a checklist that I have next to my desk, that before I come to a conclusion or, you know, set something in stone, that I ask these few questions, like, what else could there be? What other perspectives do we need to have? What are the unintended consequences if we make this decision? Who else do we need to ask? And I think building up a combination of beliefs to help us keep it open, and the questions to explore that. And then up to a point, I think the other competencies will come in where we need to reach a point where we close it down and we do actually take action. And that's where the agility and the ability to influence and actually get change embedded will be the other part of that equation.
And then just gauging from all those pointers, such as your structure and the mission that forms part of something that is actually very important for the future. I guess this actually takes us to a very important second point, which is now actually impart transparency and empathetic leadership to the way that we are going to be doing business in the future. Because I must say that this actually comes from some of my own experiences. A lot of people think that businesses are thinking forward, they're thinking towards the future as to how are they going to make sure that they actually are getting back, or maybe I'm making a better word there, but how do they actually make money in the businesses that they are currently in, but still making sure that the employee is actually currently happy. So how do we maintain the transparency, with that being said, saying that employees are still safe and secured, so that they actually know that, you know what, they shouldn't be worried about what is about to happen. They should just only worry about the current situation that they are faced with, which I think also comes from transparency from the business side and the dependency on the leadership that is being uptaken. I think maybe Debbie would maybe like to take that first, and then
maybe before maybe before I go into that, you did mention a fourth area, Matt. You mentioned cash.
Yeah,
and I'm sure some people would like to hear about how do we keep the cash going before we get to the empathy one.
Everyone wants to know about cash at the moment.
Yeah. Maybe you have some magic.
Thought I'd missed the difficult topic there, dude. Damn, you
oh, sorry.
I appreciate it. And then I think Kule also asked a great question. So, you know, on the cash side, I guess a very relevant topic at the moment, and there's a lot of for me, the cash some cash suggestions is really not too much around the expense base, because those are the easy ones to a degree. I mean, those are things that you can effectively, there's a lot of different strategies, and, you know, the reality of the situation is, you know, you probably, to the most part or greater degree, it's easier to reduce your expense base. I think one of the challenging things is to get more cash in. So I guess the cash one is an example I gave recently, and sort of had a variation of it in the pharmaceutical industry. But the point being is, and I used it in a discussion recently to try and sort of give something outside of our traditional realms of training, development, finance, products, etc. In the discussion I was, and my little brother is he's not so little, but little as in younger brother, is a very avid computer gaming fan, and so I use this analogy on the fly, and was simply, and you can sort of use this example in your own company in any way, shape, or form. But if you, let's say you were a computer hardware retailer and you focused on the gaming community, there may be certain products, let's say, within that specific community that the customers value, but perhaps they don't purchase because they may value another product over that particular product at a point in time. So in this case, for example, let's say a mouse. Computer gamers highly value sort of this rigorous, really robust mouse that can do, and I'm talking about not an active living mouse, obviously, the one that we use from a computer perspective. They value that because it does X, Y, and Z different things. And so the trade-off for them is really, well, I'm always going to buy a better mouse than a better headset, and I'd rather not have a premium-based headset. So the point being is, you need to look in your organization and say, okay, well, do an analysis on which customers, the 80-20 rule, which customers purchase the most from you, or highest value products, and say, okay, well, what is my equivalent of the computer headset? And I'm assuming the computer headset has a lot of margin, and I'm just making this up. But what is my equivalent of that computer headset that customers would love to have, that nice headset or premium headset, provided it's at a competitive price? And so, yes, nothing new in respect of, providing a discount in respect of that, assuming it's got margin. But the key to providing a discount just creates commodity value. So it's just like, well, okay, well, the price is in the range. It's not creating additional value for the customer at this point in time. And the customers are feeling like, hey, if we're going to part with something that's so precious to us at the moment, cash, there's got to be an additional value mechanism. And in this example, I said, well, quite a nice tack on to this to add the value would be, let's say there's an international gaming magazine that's really valued by these individuals, and perhaps they don't buy it because could usually be quite expensive. The idea is, would there be an opportunity to reach out to that particular magazine and say, tack on an e-subscription to that particular purchase, and therein that individual then gets the commodity value in respect to the price discount. They get the additional value of this product that they also quite enjoy, but never reach out and obtain it for whatever reason, and they can then access, let's say, that magazine in real time, so straight away. So they're getting that instant gratification that we crave in this kind of world, and they're getting a product which has satisfied their commodity value. So you've got to take that example, maybe do a little bit more work with it, and I apologize for that. You've got to think a little bit, but that's sort of the idea, is really, you can discount and create commodity value, but you've got to create additional value, and you've got to think hard about what that additional value is, because that's going to be the mechanism that's going to get the person to part with something that's quite scarce at the moment, or individuals perceive to be quite scarce at the moment. So
Matt, that's why I love us getting on these calls together, because I think you come with that really strong business brain and the ability to think things through from that value add, profit, loss, product. And I think for me, if we can merge a little bit of my people side and get into that empathetic leadership and transparent leadership side, a lot about organizations now are looking for that additional value, and absolutely it can be an additional product to give away, something of value. But I do think a lot of people are looking for additional care and attention and service. So that when I'm interacting, and whether I choose to go into this store or that store, whether it's online or offline, it's that additional interaction that I get. I mean, Alibaba has done exceptionally well with their online store of, as you go in, sort of a person with a real person with a camera on and interacting real time, is getting that additional service. And what else do you need to know, as opposed to having to search, how do I do this and this and this? You can actually have a conversation with somebody. Now, how do we, as leaders, encourage our teams and our whole organization to start building that sense of connection and empathy with our customers? But then in order for that to happen, leaders need to role model that. So I think the divide between, leaders doing the strategy, outlining the roadmap, giving the role profiles and the structures and the scorecards, as opposed to the employees, what they know with direct interaction with the customer, I think that the divide is narrowing. And I think the more we can come, these words sometimes scare people, some of the leaders of today, and be able to say, hey, we're going into the unknown. We don't know what the future is going to bring right now. We need to think together, and to create those different pockets in the organization where we can think together with all the information we have from our executive, strategic, business, cost, profit focus, but also from how do I engage? Do I know these customers? How well do I know them? How can I be creative, get the different generational thinking together, the different digital skills together, and be able to co-create something that we believe can work, and then go and test that out. But I think, in order to create that environment and that culture, leaders need to also look at their beliefs around their role as leaders. I mean, in the old days, not even that long ago, leadership was about direction and structure and plans and budgets. And it was less about, we have to admit, less about engaging and unleashing potential and ideas with people. And I mean, there's examples of both. But I think if we can encourage, how do we unleash potential, energy, and therefore productivity, so that we can all win, I think is the way that we need to go. And that is going to take leaders who are willing to be honest and transparent and humble and vulnerable and authentic. Whilst at the same time, and this is the lovely sort of yin and yang of this conversation, I think, but also out there, is how do we keep the long and the short term sustainability? We can't all be lovely and gracious and empathetic and caring if the business is going downhill. We've got to hold that tension between where the business is going and the sustainability and the longevity of that, with maybe some softening of some shareholder expectations, with the longer term pulling people into a future that we can create together.
I mean, maybe a personal question, and I think hopefully benefits other people. I think I think you hit the nail on the head, and particularly, like you said, leadership, kind of an older framework or style of leadership, is very much around the structure, the plans, direction. People need to know what's going on, which is great. But I mean, you can clearly see it, like you said, the yin and the yang in our conversation, and there's definitely a large part of that influences me personally. And I think a lot of that comes from, and I'll get to my question now, but role modeling leaders that I've worked with or engaged with, and been mentored with. And they obviously are of a generation where that is what leadership, or how leadership was defined. So how do you, I mean, this is a personal question. You kind of, any leader, male, female, may have modeled themselves on these leaders. And how do you bring in your own little flavor? Because it's sometimes difficult, because you've kind of been given this direction on all view of how leadership has been. And it depends on who you role model or set yourself against. But I definitely, have seen this. You've modeled yourself like that. And now, how do you bring in your own flavor without feeling like, oh, I'm not staying true to what I saw as the right leadership model?
Very interesting question. And I've spent a lot of time, thinking that. And, there was a time in my life, I don't know how many years ago, when I started getting more people into my organization and running, larger networks of client teams and business teams, that I sat back and I said, who have my role models been, and my mentors been, and who have I looked up to? And the truth of the matter is most of them were successful A-type males that were very strong in drive and structure and perfection and achievement. Hence, I started acting and leading like that. But through various self-development and personal development explorations, I've recognized the importance and the power of leading with heart and with compassion and with vulnerability. And I think my own search for meaning and my own search for what is more powerful? Is it control and managing others, or is it around finding that unique talent and gift and giving it wings and giving it freedom? And I mean, I daily dance and play with those, and sometimes I get it right and sometimes I get it horribly wrong. And I think for me, what I need to keep doing and what I try to do, but probably not enough, is actually ask the people that I'm interacting with to say, how is this working for you? Is it feeling like you've got space? Or is it too much space? Because I've also gone through periods where I've given too much freedom. And then people start, taking a little bit of wobbles and how I see the world by listening and asking and finding conducive environments where people are willing to give me honest feedback, because sometimes they don't want to give the boss honest feedback that maybe doesn't go down so well, like a little bit of stiff medicine. I think that's so important that us as leaders create that calibration of self-awareness and how I show up in my own head versus how I'm showing up and empowering or not people on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's that very much that I guess the first step is as anything, is to recognize, be able to say, okay, hang on. For me, it was sort of this personal conflict of, naturally I'm actually more of a caring and sort of very empathetic based person. And I'm not saying the leaders I modeled weren't, but they perhaps didn't show it in the work environment to a degree. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, okay, well, I think the conflict is with anyone, as you went through as well, is that you kind of this, you set this facade that, allows you in your mind to be able to do what you need to do as a leader. But actually there's this inner like game of tennis, as you call it, where you just sort of like, it's so conflicting because it's not really who you are. And I think that's, I don't know, I think that can create, that internal struggle can create a lot of problems from a leadership perspective. And you need, like you said, you need the yin and the yang, but you can't be one kind of binary. It can't be either that or that. So I think that struggle is, like you said, it's something you got to deal with every day. But I think first to recognize it and give yourself the opportunity to be who you actually are, be your authentic self. And I know that's so cliched and everyone speaks about it, but no one does it. I mean, very few people do it. Very few people do it in leadership positions, I think, because they don't allow themselves that room.
You allow yourself to almost open up to say, hey, I've heard feedback that I'm really good at this and it feels good, but I've also heard feedback that I struggle with this. So if I'm in my team, help me with the things that I struggle with, because, I won't know how I'm coming across unless you give me that feedback. And the more I can self-divulge some of my strengths and weaknesses and be open to making mistakes, willing to learn, willing to be wrong, willing to ask for help, I think that is the path to being able to build empathetic and caring and constructive relationships with our teams. Sorry, Kuli.
No, that's fine. It still actually builds to our next point, which is very important. And also what I like about that is that you already spoken some of the most important thing that is actually taking us to our next point, which is unleashing potential. And then Matt's mentioned some productivity points there. And of course, the possibility of business actually going downhill. And I think everybody would like to actually take a look at what are some of the things that they can do to curb that, or maybe to actually try and save the business from getting to that stage. And with that being said, maybe then we would have to actually take a look at the different skill set that the business would actually need to focus on in order to survive. Yeah. So I guess the next question then maybe that we should actually focus on, which is our next point, is how do we assist our human capital to be future ready for the business in these years to come?
Bit of bash. I think our human capital colleagues, and I love them dearly and I work with them every day, tend to find a real struggle in building credibility with the business. But I think there's an opportunity right now where they can come into their own and show real value by helping bridge that gap between business leaders and managers with people, and how we can bring them together and create a learning culture and create the skills and the future capabilities that we're going to be requiring into the future. So, we've spoken about two big, and if we can help HR to be able to help to structure organizations where it is more of a matrix structure, it is more agile, it is more flexible to deal with the changing conditions, then that's a big value add. And secondly, if they can identify the current and the future capabilities that are the unique value proposition, the unique offering, the unique competitive advantage that this company can offer in these changing times, and be able to harness what is existing in the organization, but then partner, outsource, crowdsource, collaborate to bring those capabilities in. And it's not always going to come from just the people in your organization or who's sitting on the sidelines waiting for jobs. A lot of that is going to come through small to medium-sized businesses where we partner to build capabilities and have the kind of trusted contracts and clarity of contracts where we can work together in a way that we both, or that we all went through that. I mean, some of the capabilities that we're looking at, obviously there's the financial capabilities and the strategy and the change, and being able to work in a digitization and a transforming our digital offerings in the organization, how we work. But I think on the people side, what I'm working on at the moment is the meta capabilities, that no matter what the digitization, no matter what the technology, no matter what the strategy, no matter what the financial environment is, no matter what change, whether it's COVID or the next change or the next change or the new competitor or a new way of doing business, that people have got the ability to be able to dance and react and create and collaborate in a way that there's sort of a consistent value add and assessing of the organization. I don't know if you want me to go through, I'm calling it the 8 C's. Would that be useful to go through a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we've spoken about some of them already.
I love frameworks and acronyms, and that's how my brain works.
And the basis behind these 8 C's is what you asked me earlier on, how do we build them? When we don't build them by pushing content at people, and these are the checklists how to be creative, and these are the checklists how to be collaborative. It has to be an inner journey. And it has to be an assessment as to how am I naturally showing up based on my role models, as you've said, based on my schooling, based on what's got me to success up until now. And that's probably the biggest danger, is we hang on to the stuff that's got us to success now, even when the environment's changing. And then based on what I believe as my worldview, and start looking at how many of those beliefs are useful and relevant and future focused, as opposed to some of them might be protective, might be there to keep me safe, might be there to keep me successful from in the past. And I've got to start getting a little bit looser and unpacking and understanding those neural pathways and programs that I've grown up with and or embedded and reinforced over the last however many years, depending on how old you are. So the younger we can get people to look at this at school already, the better. So, I mean, the first two we spoke about already is curiosity, and being able to really just being curious. And curiosity isn't just about business and clients and options. It's about being curious about you. So if you're a leader and you can be curious about what makes you tick, what are your talents, what are your potential, how do we unleash that, and how do we motivate you, then then we can unleash that. And also be curious about clients and what clients might be looking for, what is that value add, and how do we personalize our offering to people. And then the creativity is working with options and taking some risks and moving a little bit into the unknown, which leads us to courage. So that's the third C, to be a courageous change agent, the third and the fourth. So it's courage and change navigator. And in order for us to navigate change, we need to move into the unknown. We need to take some risks. We need to experiment. We need to fail. We need to fail very fast and learn very quickly. And you know, some of us have grown up with, we don't take risks. It's painful to make mistakes. It's not good to be embarrassed because we've messed up, or we've lost another couple of million in this project that we attempted. It can be career suicide. And these are some of the memories that we've got to sort of start moving beyond. And then it's the ability to be a conscious and critical thinker, which is sort of the 6 and 7, and 5 and 6. So if we can be conscious of what are we thinking? What are we feeling? Where's our energy going? How healthy are we? How much energy are we have in our system? What information are we taking in? And is that information useful, relevant, energizing? If we think about COVID right now, and you know, all that fake news and sensationalism and negativity, it's if we listen to that news, then that's how we start to feel and how we get pulled down into low energy, as opposed to, you know, by tapping in other spaces that might be more about there's hope, this is an opportunity, how can we start connecting differently with people, and to be able to ask those critical questions around our futures and the what ifs, and you know, the scenario planning that we can do around those big questions. And then the last two there are collaborator and contributor. So that recognizing that the independent competitor is not the future anymore. It's around bringing the best of your skill, knowledge, experience, capacity, and the best of mine, and pulling it together, but doing it with a heart of contribution. So if we come, and I don't know how many times I've been in a collaborative relationship over the years, I've been experimenting with this because I heard it was a good idea a number of years ago. And some of them you put a lot of energy and a lot of investment and a lot of time, and you put agreements together and joint products together. But at some point along that journey, somebody pulls back and kind of redirects their energy, sometimes for very good reason, because that's where their money is or that's where their market is. So it's quite a challenge to understand how to be a collaborator and find that win-win, and particularly in the tough spots. And when you need to redirect, to communicate proactively so that you don't break trust in those moments. And then ultimately asking the question from a contributor perspective, you know, what am I adding? Am I a consumer and am I just pulling from everybody else? And in this time, you know, I'm feeling sometimes a little bit of that consumer guilt, that I'm sitting in my lovely home and my lovely garden, and I've got time to have these conversations, and I'm wondering about how many people are not in this situation, and what can I contribute? And I think if we each do our little bit here, but also create that energy in an organization, we can build something much bigger in, you know, feeling entitled to something different. So that's what I'm busy working on. And ultimately those 8 C's are around optimizing energy, optimizing possible options, and being able to connect with people in a way that creates sustainable businesses going forward that are all contributing to our bigger economy, both local and global.
I mean, look, I mean, those, from our perspective, I can't add anything more of value there, because I think that, you know, those 8 C's are massively powerful. I mean, you obviously saw me nodding and acknowledging, because, you know, it's definitely from a thinking about an organization and people in an organization, you know, that those, you know, if we build out those elements, you know, you'd have the perfect workforce. Obviously, people are at different levels along the different aspects of those 8 C's, but, you know, it really does create a strong sort of, you'd like to call it sort of competencies, focus of areas to work on and, you know, grow. I think the interesting thing for me, which I don't really have an answer to now, and maybe just to ponder at, is, you know, how to build, you know, be able to create elements that help people build out those 8 C's. And I know it's something that you do and have done a lot. And I'm thinking of, you know, what does that look like? But yeah, that's a conversation for
Matt,
another day.
we're sitting with that question ourselves, and you know, using this time to experiment, to talk to our potential customers, and to offering it to people in our network, just, you know, at the moment, sort of just sharing it, and also just to see what the take up is, what the interest is, what the feedback is. And I don't think there's going to be one answer as to the how. I think some people are really valuing is sort of little bite-sized chunks of, an hour and a half. Let's just think about this stuff, think about some questions, take some habits away and practice those. And other people are saying, I really need, I need to dig much deeper. I need to really examine this and to be facilitated through a process, maybe through coaching, or maybe through later on when you can get back together and hug each other again, have those really robust debates in a room where we can give each other feedback, because I think we can learn really well through self-reflection. But I think sometimes the gap in online self-driven learning is the feedback loop.
Yeah.
And unless that's built into the process, where we need to go and ask our siblings, our parents, our colleagues, our boss about these things about me and build that self-awareness, we miss the opportunity to get some self-insight and some awareness. So you can run this, as you say, over sort of little bite-sized chunks, online webinars. You can do online learning, but I think that the balance is going to be in that blended space where there's a bit of both.
Absolutely.